It's Exodus 14. It's a story you guys know very well. Last week, we were all in the sanctuary. We heard Pastor Doug teaching, and Pharaoh has finally let the people go. And how many of you were here last week? By a show of hands, you were here last week. So the story ends, though, that the people of Israel, they start to go. They're on this journey to freedom. And Pastor Doug said these words, they're going right into a trap. If you're a Star Wars fan, you can almost picture Admiral Akbar. It's a trap, right? Like they're going on a weird trip. They're taking a weird route right now to go to freedom. And it's Exodus 14, it's verse 1. It says, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they turn and camp before Pi-hahiroth." That's a good name. "Between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal-zephon, you shall camp before it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land, the wilderness has closed them in." So they're taking a weird path. They're kind of zigzagging. They're kind of taking a weird way to freedom. And God's like, this is going to confuse Pharaoh. This is going to make Pharaoh think y'all are lost. This is going to do something in his mind, in his heart. Verse 4. "Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart, so he will pursue them. And I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord." And they did so. Now it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, "Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" So he made ready his chariot, took his people with him. Also he took 600 choice chariots, and the chariots of Egypt with captains over every one of them. So now Pharaoh's like, why have we done this? Why did I let them go? Why is this happening? Now, Pharaoh reminds me a lot of Dory in this situation. He's got some short-term memory loss. Pharaoh, why did we do this? Well, do you remember the 10 plagues? Do you remember the frogs? Do you remember the lice? Do you remember the water turning into blood? Do you remember the death of the firstborn? Are you really saying why? Why did we do this? Are you really saying why did we let them go? Like straight up, Pharaoh and Dory could be related because they've got this short-term memory loss thing going on. And he says, why have we done this? So he gets his army together, 600 chariots. Now, chariots were like the tank of the day, right? They didn't have battle tanks. They didn't have these cool weapons. They didn't have fighter jets. Like, they literally rode like on the back of horses in their little chariot, and they were like cool music playing as they're going. And you guys know what a chariot is, right? I don't have to explain. But this is like the high-end like artillery of the day, the high-end military equipment of the day. Verse 8 says, "And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with boldness. So the Egyptians pursued them. All the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, overtook them, camping by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth before Baal-zephon." So Pharaoh's got regret now. Why has he got this regret? He's got this regret because literally if they lose, here's what's happening. This is a walkout. This is all the employees of Egypt. I mean, technically they're slaves. They're not getting paid for it, but this is how things got done in Egypt. Can you imagine if all the workers just walked out of like a Walmart, of a Target, of any place? Like they're gone. And he's like, oh my gosh, our country's destroyed. We don't have workers. How am I going to get a Big Mac? Like, this isn't going how I planned it. Well, they didn't have Big Macs back then. Okay, that'd be a good question for him to ask. How am I going to get a Big Mac? Like, he's a prophet. He knew those were going to happen one day. And he has completely forgot. He has completely forgotten the reason he let the people go. And I want to tell you guys, I want to encourage you guys, don't forget what God has done. Don't forget what God has done, because we see this mistake that happens. When you forget what God has done, you do stupid things. I'm not saying that to be mean to anyone or to say, but when you forget what God has done, you begin to do stupid actions. Your mind wanders in ways that it shouldn't. But if you can remember the things God has done in your life, which we're going to look at today, we're going to look at some incredible things about God. But don't forget what he's done. Remember every single day what he's done for you, the ways he's blessed you, the fact that you're waking up in the morning and breathing, the fact that you're here in church, the fact that there's clothes on your back, I almost said feet on your shoes, there's shoes on your feet. Like don't forget what he's done. And it says the people of Israel went out with boldness. They went out with boldness. Now, this word boldness actually literally means like rebellion against authority, which is sometimes a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing. Because sometimes it's good to rebel against authority when authority is telling you to do something wrong, when they're not doing what is right, when they're not doing the things that they should be doing, that God tells them to do. But I would ask you guys, do you rebel for or against God? Does your life look like a life that is conforming to what the world tells you to do, much like Pharaoh, much like Egypt? Or does your life look like one of these people who's saying, no, what's happening in Egypt is wrong, and I'm going with boldness, I'm rebelling against that. I don't care what the world says. I don't care if the world says this about this. You know, I don't care if the world looks on and goes, Sean, how dare you call your baby a son? They don't even know what they are yet. No, that's my son. Right? They don't have a choice in that matter. Right? Do you rebel for or against God? Because the world will look on and start to say, oh, you guys are so hateful. Oh, you're so close-minded. Oh, how dare you think that way? And I'm going, no, I'm just going by what God's word says. And it says he created them male and female. And there's so many different things and areas of your life that you can look at this. And Israel, they start to run. They start to go. Pharaoh starts to pursue them. And it really looks like God has set them right into a trap. This doesn't look good. But number one, we're going to have 7 points here. Number one, this doesn't look good. It looks like they're in a trap, but God knows what he's doing. Guys, we serve a God who knows what he's doing. There's nothing that catches God by surprise. Can I tell you, even though it stinks, even though it's scary, even though it's sad, God was not caught off guard by the war that's happening right now in Ukraine. All the craziness we see in our country, all of this weird stuff, God's not like, whoa, how'd that happen? I didn't see that coming. God's got a plan, and here's what's crazy. As more bad things start to happen, that's actually good for us, because that means he's closer to coming back. That means the world's closer to ending. Now, that's not me saying, guys, in the next 10 days, God's going to come back, and we're all going to, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying he says the bad things are going to happen more and more and more frequently. He knows what he's doing. Verse 10, though, it says, when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us up out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. So what happens? If you guys remember from last week, God actually sends a fiery pillar by night and a cloudy, a smoky pillar during the day. Picture almost like a tornado, a giant tornado of fire or of smoke for them to follow. For the Israelites to follow, to get out of Egypt. This is the way, follow me. But what happens in this moment is they look back. They take their eyes off the pillar and they look back to Egypt. They look back to what's happening. They look back to the army pursuing them. Number two, I want to encourage you guys, God is there for you even when you turn away. God is there for you even when you turn away, because here's what we're going to see. We're going to see that they turn away. They get scared, it says they're afraid. They're like, why? Why did you do this, Moses? You took us out of Egypt just so we could die? I'd rather be a slave still. Why did you do this to us? And they completely lose their focus. Galatians 5:7 says, you were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? Hebrews 12 tells us to fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Anyone in here run track? Anyone? Anyone in here ever just run? You've ran before? I just want more hands up, right? So here's the thing about track. You're running in a circle, and you're making left-hand turns. Unless you're running the 100, then you're just running in a straight line. But in track, you are running, and what are you doing? You're looking ahead. You're looking straight ahead. You're looking towards the goal. You're looking to the finish line. You don't see track runners doing this as they're running. Because what happens? You fall, you trip, you turn. You start not running in a straight line. If you turn around and look, you're not going to keep going straight. You're not going to keep going towards the finish line. Right? If we keep our eyes on Jesus, we'll run a straight race. We'll run a race towards him. But if we turn back, if we look in on something different, if we look at what's pursuing us or look at the enemy or look at the things of this world, what happens is we start to turn. We start to stumble. We start to trip and fall. Our knees get all scraped up on the track. That hurts. If you ever tripped on a track, that hurts. Get like track rash. It's the worst. But God is there for you. God is there for you even when you turn away. So they're in this situation where it's Pharaoh's army on one side and it's the sea on the other. And I'm sure you guys have been in a situation like that where it's like a lose-lose situation. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You know what I'm talking about? Where there's no way I can win. There's no way we're going to recover from this. There's no way I'm going to make it. I failed this test, or I liked this person and we broke up and I'm never going to find someone else like them. Right? Just like you're in a situation, whatever it is, there's a sickness in your family. You're in a situation where your mind is just so dark. You're in such a bad place. You're so depressed. You don't even know if life is worth living anymore. It's like, do I just keep living in depression or do I try to end this? Like, you're just stuck in this place. And this is exactly where Israel finds themselves. And it says they actually cried out, which is a good thing to do. It's a good thing. Guys, when you find yourself in that place, cry out. Literally, cry out to God. Shout out to him, yell at him if you want to. He's there listening. They cry out, but here's their mistake. They cry out and then they say, are we going to die in the wilderness? They cried out, but they lost faith. It was good that they cried out, but it's bad that they lost faith because even though they turned away, we're going to see that God is still there for them. But what happens when you forget his promises for you, his promises that are good for you, his promise to do a work in your life, to complete the good work he started in your life, when you forget those things, your mind starts to go to the worst case scenario. And Israel goes from, oh, we're running, we're free, to, we're going to die! like, how do you go to this place? Like, they're singing the freedom dance. They're marching out. Like, I almost picture they're like, I don't know, there's probably like a weird Israel dance happening. Hey, yeah, yeah, hey, yeah, yeah, whoa. You know, I don't know. Maybe they're doing like this. I don't know. To something, we're going to die! Right, what happened? That's a great laugh. I don't know who that was. Bless your hearts. Whew. Man, I wish I could record that whenever I say something I find funny. Verse 13. Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Number 3, if you're taking notes, God will fight for you. It's that simple. God will fight for you. You just got to be still. You got to be still. You've got to give him that place. Moses tells the people, don't be afraid. Now, that's a good thing to say, and it's a good thing to hear, but like, you need to have a reason to not be afraid, right? Like, I remember growing up, I was scared of the boogeyman. Anyone else, right? Did the boogeyman ever like live under your bed? Or I was scared of the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz. I swear, she lived in my closet and haunted me in my dreams. True story. So, but listen, here's what would happen. I was scared in my room at night, and my parents are like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm afraid the boogeyman's under my... So this is what my parents did not do. Shh. This is what they didn't do. Don't be afraid. And then just walk out and turn the lights off and shut the door. My parents didn't do that. Why? Because if they told me not to be afraid, that'd be like if they were like, hey, Sean, fly. Like, what do you want? Like, no. But they gave me a reason to not be afraid. Sean, don't be afraid. Why? I'm so scared. Well, here, look. We'll look under your bed. Ah! No, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. But what about the closet? Okay, well, look. There's nothing in the closet. We turned your nightlight. I swear, this happened every night when I was 16. They turned the nightlight on. 6. They'd turn the nightlight on. They would check everywhere in the room and show me there's no reason to be afraid. Moses says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Why? Because the Lord will fight for you. Guys, I find it's a lot easier to trust God when there's no other options. When you're completely at a place where you've tried everything, it's really easy to trust God. But that's not a good way to look at it. Because here's what we do so often. I've tried everything else. But you haven't tried God yet? There's nothing left to do but pray. Shouldn't prayer have been the first thing you did? Stand still. He will fight for us, but we should turn to him first. They're going to have to trust God because they don't have another option. But that should always be our first option. So he tells them, stand still. Just stop for a second. Stop trying to save yourselves. Just stop. Moses learned this. 40 years ago, Moses made a big mistake. He got sick of Israel being slaves, so he killed an Egyptian. He tried to free the people as a one-man army. Big mistake. He took it into his own hands. So he spent 40 years in the wilderness as a shepherd, learning to be still. I think of this guy named Peter. He was one of Jesus' disciples. Jesus is about to die on the cross. He's in the garden praying. The soldiers come. Peter cuts off one of their ears. Peter didn't stand still. Peter tried to take actions into his own hands. What did Jesus do? He healed the soldier's ear. He put it back on and he went to the cross. Can you imagine if somehow Peter was successful and Jesus wasn't able to die for us? See, we can't take things into our own hands. We've got to allow the Lord to fight for us. So now Moses is a leader who's learned this. He's shown everyone around him what he's learned. And you have an option here. You can focus on your problem. Oh, the sea and the Egyptians, and we were just like this, but now we're going to die. Or you can focus on God. They turned away from the fiery pillar, the smoky pillar. So they lose sight of everything. But if we're able to stand still and look to God, he will fight for us. Verse 15. The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward, but lift up your rod, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I indeed will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I've gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." So now here's what happens. I told you to be still, right? But now God's saying, why do you cry to me? Why do you cry? He says, why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward and lift up your rod. Ready? Number 4, God will tell you what to do. If you're still and you turn to him and you allow him to fight for you, he's going to tell you what to do. Hey, tell them to go. Moses, lift up your hand. Pray, seek God, look to him, and then act. Right? You can't just sit around and hope things will happen all the time. It's not how it works. People used to joke around with me back when I was single, and I was like the only single guy here for like a really long time. And they're like, "Sean, I'm just waiting for the right one. I'm waiting for the right one." Like, I wasn't dating people. I wasn't dating around. I wasn't going on a bunch of dates. Like, I wasn't doing that. Like, I was just living my life. Right? I was serving here. I was doing stuff. Like, I was enjoying my single life. But they're like, "Sean, you say you're waiting for the right one, but what do you think? Like, God's just going to snap his fingers and she's just going to appear like in your room one day and be like, 'I'm your wife.' Like, that's not how it works. Like, you've actually got to talk to a girl." "Oh, really? I mean, I need to speak words to them?" So then I walked up to a girl after, I was like, "Sup?" No, I didn't do that. No, but you can't just sit still the whole time. You pray. God will tell you what to do, and you act. So he tells Moses what to do, and this takes a lot of faith now. When God tells you to do something, even though he's told you to do it, it takes a lot of faith to do it. Hey, I want you to hold out that rod you got, and I'm going to split the sea in half. Like, literally split the sea. really? Like, if God told me to do that, there's a part of me that'd be like, yeah, I'm going to, everyone, we're going to cross the sea. Get ready. Sean, the army's getting closer. Hold on. like I would have, like, I don't know if I would do it. Like, can you imagine what he'd look like if it didn't work? But he has so much faith because God told him to do it. The act is easy. It's easy to do this. It really is. Hold out the rod. But doing it and trusting it is difficult. But Moses does it, and what happens next? Verse 19. The angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them. So the pillar was in front of them. Remember, they were following it. They turned away from it to what? Went before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. So God tells Moses, hey, Moses, here's what I want you to do. But then I love what happens next. God protects Israel until the sea is split, until he makes a way. Number 5, God will protect you. Understand this, guys. I told you earlier, nothing catches God by surprise. He's going to protect you. The army's getting closer. And what are we going to do? We're going to die. Moses, I want you to stick the rod out. I'm going to split the sea. I'm sure Moses is like debating. Stuff's going through his head. So what does God do? He takes this giant pillar, this giant almost tornado of fire, and he goes and throws it behind them, between them and Egypt. And says, you know what? As you're working out your faith, as you're standing still, as you're acting, as I've told you what to do, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect you in this moment. I'm going to be with you in this moment. I love how Psalm 139:5 says, it says, you have hedged me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. We've often heard it said, we've sung it before, I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. God literally leads the way, and at the same time, he protects us from behind. And he's got us in both situations. And I don't think we always even begin to realize it. We don't realize how much God protects us. We don't realize what he's doing. Silas, I forgot to put it in my slides. I have a picture in, I think, the teaching slides folder. It's like a black and white comic strip of like spiritual warfare. If we can get that up super fast. I totally forgot to put that in. But I don't think we realize how much God protects us. Hopefully you'll be able to find it. Because there's a spiritual war happening around us. It's very real. And as we're walking through life, like, I don't know if this is literally what it's like, but God's protecting us all the time. There's a very real spiritual world, a spiritual realm that we don't see. As we talk about principalities and the heavenlies and all these things, and God's protecting us. And I don't show this to scare you guys, but I show this to say he's protecting you even when you don't know it. And this is what he's doing for the people of Israel. And the Egyptians didn't actually realize they were being protected too. Well, what do you mean? Suddenly they can't get to Israel. They have an opportunity to turn away. They have an opportunity to stop what they're doing, to stop the pursuit. This is what I call a red flag. This is what I call a stop sign. This is God giving them one last chance. Stop what you're doing. Let them go. I'm preventing you from getting towards them. They could have turned away, but they don't. So we see what happens next. We're almost done. Verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night. I made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground. The waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. So what happens now? The Red Sea parts. Literally, this sea that you could drown in, that you could swim in. It says that there's an east wind, that God caused an east wind. Scientifically, this has actually been proven that this could happen. But whether it happens by science, by nature, by any of these things, number 6, God does miracles. Because even if this was just a science nature thing, that a wind came at that, like, for it to happen in that perfect timing, when Israel is caught between an army and a sea, and for this wind to come, God does miracles, and he still does them today. That's the God that we serve. So they're walking through this sea now, split on either side. And the book of Psalm 77, if you guys want to read more about it, literally describes that there's actually like thunder and lightning in this. Like, this is a crazy, can you imagine you're walking between two bodies of water up above you like this, and there's lightning and thunder happening? I love the scene in the Prince of Egypt movie. Like, lightning flashes and you like see a whale swimming through the water. Like, it's such an incredible picture. But our God still does miracles. And he is protecting them. And he's got that pillar behind them, protecting them. And then verse 24, now it came to pass in the morning watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and clouds, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians. He took off their chariot wheels, so that they drove with them with difficulty. The Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, on their chariots and on their horsemen. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. When the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth, while the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. Not so much as one of them remained. So we see God literally, we talked about him fighting for you. We see him fighting the Egyptians. He's ripping off their chariot wheels. The horses can't drag these chariots. They can't go anymore. And eventually he closes the sea on them. He closes the sea on them. He drowns them. He literally kills the enemy. He defeats the enemy. He destroys the enemy, which leads us to verse 29 and our final point. But the children of Israel had walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Number 7, God wins. It's pretty simple. God wins. If there's anything you need to know about God and what he's done for us, in the end, he wins. It's that simple. Yes, he knows what he's doing. He's there for you. He fights for you. He tells you what to do. He protects you. He does miracles. But in the end, he wins. And what I love is he actually gives them visible confirmation of this. What did it say in verse 30? And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. So when they looked back before, they saw this army pursuing them. But now they're able to look and see how God won. And they see these dead bodies, and they see how they're not going to chase them anymore because they're dead. They can't chase them anymore. They are truly, truly free. How can you remind yourself that God has conquered the enemy? I want you to think about that. I love what it says happens here. It says they saw the great work. They feared the Lord. They respected him. And they believed the Lord. Guys, when you see the Lord work in your life, and when you see that he has conquered the enemy and he's conquered everything and that he's there for you, and you remind yourself of that daily, this is our God. These 7 points weren't super profound. They weren't super crazy, but this is our God. This is the God that we serve. This is the God who loves us, who sent his son to die for us, who cares for us. This is the God we get to follow. When leaders fail, when our parents fail, when our teachers fail, when political figures fail, when anyone else fails, our God will never fail us. When the world's in turmoil, we can be in peace knowing he's in control, he's on his throne, and he knows what he's doing. Amen?